I suppose you reach a certain age when the past becomes more vivid than the present, when yesterday's rain feels more real than today's sunshine, and I am there now, sitting in this chair by the window where the light comes in slanted and golden in the afternoons, watching the street where children play games I no longer remember the names of. And I think about her, my sister, my beautiful terrible sister, and how one decision, one moment of weakness wrapped in the ribbon of love, can unravel an entire life like a sweater pulled at the wrong thread. They say time heals all wounds. But I have learned that time only teaches you how to live with the bleeding, how to walk with a limp and call it grace, how to smile with a mouth full of regret and call it wisdom. Her name was Catherine, though everyone called her Kate, and she was 3 years younger than me, which meant she was always catching up, always running behind me on those dirt roads near our father's farm, always wanting what I had. Always watching me with those green eyes that caught the light like creek water over stones. And I loved her the way you love something fragile that you're meant to protect. Something precious that makes you feel important just by needing you. We grew up with the smell of hay and honeysuckle, with the sound of our mother's voice calling us in for supper, when the fireflies started their evening dance, with our father's rough hands and gentle heart, and we thought, as children do, that this was how life would always be, that nothing would ever change the shape of our small, perfect world. But the world has a way of laughing at the plans of little girls who think love is simple and forever, is a promise anyone can keep. I met Thomas when I was 19, at a church social where the summer heat made everyone lazy and soft, where the lemonade tasted like sunshine and possibility, and he was tall, with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he laughed, with hands that knew how to fix broken things, with a voice that made you want to tell him your secrets, all of them, every hidden thing you kept locked away in the quiet chambers of your heart. He asked me to dance and I said yes, and in that moment, with his hand on my waist and the music floating through the open windows, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, like my entire life had been leading to this, to him, to the way he looked at me like I was something rare and valuable, something worth keeping. We courted for 6 months, proper and careful, with my father watching from the porch, and my mother leaving the door open when he came to call. And then he asked me to marry him under the oak tree, where we'd carved our initials like fools who believed in permanence. And I said yes with my whole heart, with every breath in my body, with the kind of certainty you only have once in your life before disappointment teaches you to hedge your bets. Kate was happy for me, or so she said, her smile bright as a new penny, her arms around my neck as she whispered congratulations. But I see it now, looking back with eyes that have learned to recognize the shadows behind smiles. I see the way she held on a little too tight. The way her laugh had an edge to it like glass about to break. The way she started spending more time at our house after Thomas and I got engaged. Always dropping by when she knew he'd be there. Always wearing her best dress. Always touching her hair the way women do when they want to be noticed. I told myself it was nothing. That she was just excited about the wedding. That she wanted to help. That I was being silly and jealous for no reason. Because this was Kate, my little sister, my shadow, my responsibility, and she would never do anything to hurt me. Love makes you blind like that, makes you ignore the warning signs, makes you tell yourself comfortable lies, because the truth is too sharp to hold. The wedding was planned for October when the leaves turn gold and red, and the air smells like wood smoke and ending summers. When everything is beautiful in that desperate way that beauty gets when it knows it's temporary, and I spent my days sewing my dress with our mother, choosing flowers, imagining the life Thomas and I would build together, the children we'd have, the ordinary miracles of breakfast and sunset, and growing old with someone who chose you. Kate helped with everything, was there for every fitting, every decision, every moment, and Thomas, dear Thomas, was working extra hours at the mill to save money for our future, coming by in the evenings tired but happy, kissing my forehead and telling me about the house he was fixing up for us, the one with the blue shutters and the garden where I could grow roses. I was so happy I could barely breathe sometimes, so full of anticipation that I felt like I might burst open like a seed pod, scattering joy everywhere. It was a Tuesday when everything shattered. I remember because Tuesdays were when my mother did the washing, and the sheets were hanging on the line, white as surrender, dancing in the wind like ghosts of all the peaceful nights we'd never have again. I went to the mill to bring Thomas his lunch, something I did sometimes when I couldn't wait until evening to see him. And I found them in the old storage room behind the main building, found them tangled together like vines, like a knot you can't untie, found my sister and my fiancé doing the one thing that can never be undone, never be taken back, never be forgiven no matter how many years you live, or how much you try to convince yourself that forgiveness is possible. She was crying, I remember that, her face wet and red, and Thomas was pale as death, reaching for me, saying words that dissolved into nothing before they reached my ears, and I just stood there, frozen, feeling my heart crack, right down the middle like a plate dropped on a stone floor, feeling the future I'd built in my mind collapse into dust and ash, and the bitter taste of betrayal that would coat my tongue for the rest of my life. I didn't scream or cry, or make a scene like they do in stories. I just turned around and walked away. Walked all the way home with my legs moving even though I couldn't feel them, with my eyes seeing the world in shades of grey, with my mind trying to understand how this could happen, how the two people I loved most in the world could carve out my heart, and not even have the decency to do it cleanly. My mother found me sitting on my bed, still holding the lunch basket, staring at nothing, and when she asked what was wrong I told her in a voice that didn't sound like mine, told her in short, simple sentences that killed something in her eyes too, and then she held me while I finally cried, while I sobbed until there was nothing left inside me, but a hollow space where trust used to live. Thomas came to the house that night, hat in his hands, face full of shame, and my father met him at the door with a warning in his eyes, and a tension in his shoulders that spoke of violence barely restrained, and I listened from my room as Thomas tried to explain. Tried to say it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that he loved me, only me, that Kate had confused him, had been pursuing him, had caught him in a weak moment. My father told him to leave and never come back, told him that a man who can't keep his hands to himself isn't fit to marry anybody, told him that he'd broken something precious, and no amount of apologies would glue it back together. I heard Thomas crying, actually crying, and part of me wanted to run downstairs and forgive him, wanted to believe that people make mistakes and love can survive anything, but I stayed in my room, stayed silent, stayed strong in the only way I knew how. Kate tried to talk to me the next day, came to my room with tears streaming down her face, with her hands shaking, with words tumbling out about how she didn't mean for it to happen, how she'd loved Thomas too, how she couldn't help herself, how she was sorry, so sorry, sorrier than I could ever know. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw a stranger, saw someone who could take what wasn't hers, who could justify hurting me, because her feelings were too big to control, who could cry and expect sympathy after committing the cruelest betrayal a sister can inflict, and I said the words that would define the rest of our lives, said them calmly and quietly, said them with the certainty of a door closing forever. I don't have a sister anymore, I told her, and she gasped like I'd hit her, but I meant it with every fiber of my being, meant it so completely that even now, 60 years later, I can still feel the relief of severing that bond, of cutting away the infected part to save the rest. She left the next week. Left town with Thomas because of course they ended up together, because betrayal has its own momentum, because once you've crossed that line you might as well keep walking. They got married in some town 50 miles away, had 3 children, built a life on the foundation of what they'd stolen from me, and I heard about them sometimes through people who knew people. Heard that Thomas drank too much, that Kate looked tired and worn, that their marriage was filled with arguments and accusations, that neither of them could escape the shadow of what they'd done. I felt nothing when I heard these things, or told myself I felt nothing, though late at night sometimes I would think about them, and feel a dark satisfaction that their happiness had curdled, that they'd gotten exactly what they deserved, that poetic justice was real after all. I never married, though I had offers, had men who courted me with flowers and promises, But I couldn't trust again. Couldn't open that door after it had been slammed so violently shut. Couldn't risk giving my heart to someone who might handle it carelessly. I became a teacher instead. Poured all that love I'd saved for Thomas, and the children we'd never have into other people's children. Taught 3 generations of kids how to read and write and think. Became Miss Margaret, stern and kind. The teacher everyone remembered. The one who made you feel like you mattered, like you were capable of great things if you just tried hard enough. I had a good life, in its way, had friends and purpose and the satisfaction of work well done, had my parents until they passed, had my garden and my books and my routines, had everything except what I'd wanted most, except the family of my own, the husband who'd grow old beside me, the children who'd visit on Sundays, the ordinary magic of being chosen and choosing back. The years moved like a river, steady and inevitable, carrying away youth and strength and certainty, leaving behind the sediment of experience and the erosion of hope. And I grew old in that house where I'd grown up, watching seasons change through the same windows, walking the same floors until I wore the pattern down, living a life that was peaceful but incomplete, like a song missing its final verse. My mother died first, then my father. And I stood at their graves and felt the loneliness settle into my bones like cold, felt the weight of being the last one, the one left behind to remember everything, to carry all the stories and all the pain and all the might, have beens. I thought about Kate sometimes, wondered if she thought about me, wondered if she regretted what she'd done, or if she'd convinced herself that love justified everything, that the heart wants what it wants and morality is just a cage for the weak. Then, 3 weeks ago, I got a letter, the first communication from my sister in 60 years, and my hands shook as I opened it, my heart beating fast like I was 19 again, and afraid of what I might discover. It was short, written in a wavering hand that I barely recognized, and it said that Thomas had died 6 months ago, that she was alone now, sick with cancer, living in a nursing home in a city I'd never been to, that she wanted to see me one last time, wanted to apologize properly, needed my forgiveness before she died. She included her phone number and the address, and I sat there with that letter in my lap, feeling all those decades of anger and hurt rushing back like a flood, feeling the old wound tear open, feeling the girl I'd been crying inside the woman I'd become. I didn't respond right away, let days pass while I thought about it, while I argued with myself, while I tried to decide what I owed her, what I owed myself, what forgiveness meant, and whether it was something you gave for the other person or for yourself. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her die without the comfort of my absolution, to hold on to my anger because it was all I had left of what happened, because releasing it felt like saying it was okay, that time had erased the magnitude of her betrayal. But another part of me, a part that surprised me with its strength, wanted to see her, wanted to look into those green eyes one more time, wanted to say all the thing held inside for 6 decades, wanted, maybe, to find some kind of peace before my own inevitable ending. So I went, took a bus because I'd never learned to drive, traveled through landscapes that blurred together, arrived at a building that smelled like disinfectant and old age, where nurses walked with efficient kindness, and people waited for death with varying degrees of grace. They took me to her room, a small space with pale walls and a window overlooking a parking lot, and there she was, my sister, my betrayer, my lost one, so small in that bed, so fragile and wasted by disease, her green eyes huge in her thin face, her hair white and sparse, her hands like bird bones on the blanket. She saw me and started crying, reaching out. And I stood in the doorway feeling a confusion of emotions so intense I thought I might collapse, feeling anger and pity and love and hatred all tangled together, until I couldn't tell them apart. I sat in the chair beside her bed and she talked, words spilling out in a rush like she was afraid she'd run out of time, telling me everything. How she'd been jealous, how she'd loved Thomas not because of who he was but because I had him, how she'd seduced him deliberately, how she'd regretted it the moment it was over, how their marriage had been a punishment they inflicted on each other for 40 years, how Thomas had never forgotten me, had called out my name in his sleep, had looked at her sometimes with resentment for what she'd cost him, how they'd poisoned each other slowly with their guilt, and their knowledge, they'd sacrificed everything real for something hollow. She told me her children didn't visit much, that they'd grown up in a house filled with bitterness, and learned to stay away, that she'd been alone for a long time even before Thomas died, that she'd thought about me every day, every single day, imagined the life I might be living, hoped I was happy, hoped I'd found love, hoped I'd forgiven her even though she knew she didn't deserve it. I listened without speaking, watching her face, seeing the ravages of time and sickness and regret, and I thought about all those years I'd spent being angry, all that energy I'd poured into not forgiving her, all the ways I'd let that one terrible day define my entire life. I thought about the children I'd never had, the love I'd never let in, the fear that had shaped me as surely as a potter shapes clay, and I realized, sitting there in that sterile room with death hovering close, that she hadn't just stolen my future, I'd given it away, had handed it over by refusing to heal, by choosing anger over possibility, by letting betrayal be the most important thing that ever happened to me. We'd both lost, both lived half lives, both been destroyed by that Tuesday afternoon. And the real tragedy wasn't just what she'd done, but what I'd done to myself in response. She asked me, finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, if I could forgive her, if I could give her that before she died. And I opened my mouth to say yes, to offer her that comfort, to release us both from the prison we'd built, but the word wouldn't come, stuck in my throat like a stone. Because 60 years is a long time to carry anger, and you can't just put it down because someone asks nicely, because forgiveness isn't a switch you flip but a process you work through, because I was still, somewhere deep inside, that 19-year-old girl standing in the doorway of that storage room watching her world end. I sat there in silence, and she watched me with those green eyes full of hope and fear, and I felt the weight of the moment, felt the power I had to grant mercy or withhold it, felt the terrible responsibility of being the one who gets to decide. I reached out and took her hand, felt how cold it was, how light, how ready to let go, and I said, I spent my whole life not forgiving you, Kate, and look where it got me, look where it got both of us. And she squeezed my hand with what little strength she had, and I said, I don't know if I can forgive you, I don't know if I ever will, but I can tell you this, I'm tired of being angry, I'm tired of letting that one day take up so much space. And maybe that's not forgiveness, but it's all I have to give you right now. She nodded and cried harder, and I sat there holding her hand, and we stayed like that until she fell asleep. Two old women who'd wasted their lives on hurt and pride, and the illusion that justice was more important than peace. I left the next morning, took the bus back to my empty house, back to my chair by the window, back to my routines and my memories and my careful, narrow life, and I thought about what I'd said, about whether it was enough, about whether she'd die feeling forgiven or abandoned, about whether I'd done the right thing, or just taken one more thing from her, when she had nothing left to take. The call came 3 days later, the nurse telling me that Catherine had passed peacefully in her sleep, that she'd seemed calm at the end, that she'd left instructions for me to have a small box of photographs, the only things she'd asked to be saved and sent. The box arrived yesterday, and I opened it with shaking hands, and inside were pictures of us as children, of our parents, of the farm, of that oak tree where Thomas proposed, and underneath them all, a photograph I'd never seen before, of Thomas and Kate on their wedding day, and they looked so young and so miserable, so aware of what they'd done and what it had cost, so trapped in their own story, and written on the back in Kate's handwriting were the words, "We paid for it, Meg, every day we paid for it. I hope that gives you some comfort. I hope you were happier than we were." I sit here now with that photograph in my lap, with the afternoon light fading to evening, with the sounds of children playing growing distant as mothers call them home, and I think about happiness and revenge, and the different ways a life can be wasted. I think about how I wanted them to suffer and they did, how I wanted poetic justice and I got it, how I wanted to matter enough that my absence would haunt them and I did, and none of it, not one single moment of their suffering or my satisfaction, gave me back what I lost, gave me the children or the love or the uncomplicated joy of being young and trusting. I won, I suppose, in that petty Peric way that winning sometimes means everyone loses, and I'm left here at 80, 2 years old with a lifetime of anger that accomplished nothing except guaranteeing my solitude, with a sister who died hoping for forgiveness I couldn't quite give, with the knowledge that we were both prisoners of that one terrible choice she made when we were young and stupid, and certain that what we wanted mattered more than what was right. The strangest part, the part that keeps me awake now in these long nights when sleep is harder to find than forgiveness ever was, is that I miss her in a way I never let myself miss her when she was alive. Miss having someone who remembers our parents and our childhood, and the girls we were before everything went wrong. I am the last one now, the last keeper of those memories, and when I go they'll go with me, and it will be as if none of it ever happened, as if our whole family was just a story told once and forgotten, as if all that love and hurt and wasted time amounted to nothing more than photographs in a box that no one will want or understand. I look at that wedding picture and I see two people who destroyed 3 lives chasing something they thought was love, and I see myself, the invisible presence in that photograph, the ghost they carried with them, the price they paid, and I wonder if any of us ever really understood what we were doing, if any of us made choices, or if we were just swept along by currents too strong to resist, by feelings too big to control, by the terrible momentum of being human and flawed and desperately, dangerously young. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but what they don't tell you is that after you've eaten it, you're still hungry, still empty, still alone at the table with nothing but the bitter aftertaste, and the knowledge that you've consumed something that consumed you right back, and there's a special kind of loneliness in being the one left standing when everyone else has fallen, in winning a war that nobody really won, in getting justice that feels like nothing at all when you finally hold it in your hands. I don't know if I forgive her, even now, even with her dead and buried, and beyond the reach of my anger. I don't know if forgiveness is even the right word for this feeling that's not quite peace, but isn't rage anymore either. This acceptance of the fact that we were all just people doing the best we could with the tools we had, making terrible mistakes and living with them and hoping, somehow, that it all meant something. The light is almost gone now, and soon I'll get up and make my tea and eat my simple dinner, and go to bed in the room where I've slept alone for 60 years, and tomorrow I'll wake up and do it all again, and the day after that, and the day after that, until one day I won't wake up at all, and the story will finally be over, and maybe somewhere, if there's anything after this, I'll see Kate again and we'll be young and whole, and I'll understand everything I'm supposed to understand. Or maybe there's nothing, and we just disappear, and all of this, all the love and betrayal and anger and regret, all of it will be erased like writing in sand when the tide comes in. But tonight, sitting here with this photograph and these memories and this strange, hollow feeling where my anger used to be, I can tell you this much. I can tell you what 60 years of holding a grudge taught me. I can tell you that being right doesn't keep you warm at night. That justice doesn't fill the empty rooms of your house. That revenge doesn't give you back what you lost. And that sometimes the person you hurt most, by refusing to forgive, isn't the one who wronged you. It's yourself, it's always yourself, and by the time you figure that out it's too late. The years are gone, the players are dead, and you're left alone with nothing but the cold comfort of knowing you never gave in, you never surrendered, you never let them off the hook, and the price of that victory is everything, absolutely everything you might have had instead.